It's opening night. Philly, Dallas. The Eagles better win this game, and I'll tell you why in just a second on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Facts have been spoken. It is your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen here on Locked On NFL. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of The Barbershop, one of two Locked On NFL shows, and a credentialed member of the media for 2 decades. I like to think that I have my pulse on the NFL, but just in case I missed something, Spencer German is here sitting in for Chris Carter. Spencer German is the host of Locked On Browns. He's going to help me navigate through some clips and tell you some of the biggest stories from around the National Football League as we head into tonight's game, which is the kickoff for the National Football League. Across our network, it is Crossover Thursday presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app and use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. We want to shout out to everydayers who join us each and every day here on Locked On NFL and across the network. We do not take your 30 minutes that you spend with us for granted. We're glad to have you. If you're new, well, we'll have you over too, and then you could be an everydayer if you just keep coming back. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a quick rundown where we're going first. This is where we're going to end up. Broncos get a big bag. Yep, they sure do. Spencer and I are also going to talk about the draft night trade between the teams that we cover, the Browns and the Jaguars. Right in the middle of the show, the Dallas Cowboys look to shock Philly and get some feel-good back in their organization after trading their best player. But we're going to start talking about the champs here on opening night. Spencer, toe finally meets leather, man. We've been waiting and building up to this. And when you do this every day for a living, it could be a tedious process. But here we are, finally, on football that counts and that matters with the defending Super Bowl champions opening the year.
Yeah, it feels good. I think there's moments in the offseason that go by quick, and then there's moments that go by slow. I kind of felt like training camp in the preseason, especially here in Cleveland, felt like it was particularly slow. So I'm looking forward to this weekend. I'm looking forward to football getting started on Thursday night with this prime matchup between two teams that everybody knows pretty well in that NFC East. And I'm curious to see how the Eagles sort of start off their Super Bowl defense, if you will, and how the Cowboys kind of respond emotionally after what's obviously been a pretty wild week for them in the aftermath of the Micah Parsons trade.
No, it was wild. We're going to talk about Philly first. But first of all, y'all offseason wasn't slow. Hell no. I talked about y'all every day on here on Locked On. What are you talking about, the Cleveland Browns?
Well, I felt like we got to the end of the preseason. It felt like it was dragging a little bit. I was like, I'm ready for the regular season to be here. So I'm excited we finally have real football to talk about.
My man talked about backup quarterbacks enough to last a lifetime up there in Cleveland. No, but something that neither of us are really, really familiar with, and that is sitting in the seat of a champion and being able to dissect your team and think about, okay, we just won a Super Bowl, but now let's move on. I am going to shock you when I tell you this. About 10 minutes before the Super Bowl started last year, I was in D.C. with a bunch of friends. I posted a big mean mug picture of Vic Fangio standing there looking like an old retired linebacker, and I zoomed in on it and I said, watch what he is about to do. And it seemed like I was omniscient because that defense dominated one of the greatest offensive players and offensive coaches we've seen in NFL history, and I felt vindicated. Well, my man Lou DiBiase says, yeah, well, what have you done for me lately? That was last year. Vic Fangio, he might be making a mistake with who he's starting in his secondary. Check this out.
All right, so we now know that Adoree Jackson is starting at outside corner tomorrow against Dallas, and Sidney Brown is starting at safety. I don't want to say they're playing it scared. That might be too aggressive, but I think Vic Fangio is being a little bit too cautious and prioritizing the floor at these two positions. If it was up to me, I think the best thing for the Eagles for the long term, not just down the road after this season, but the long-term stretch of this season as well, the best thing to do right now is to start Drew Makuba and Keely Ringo. Let them grow into those roles so by the end of the year, I think you have the higher ceiling player that's ready to go for a playoff run. I know Fangio doesn't trust Ringo, and he normally does not start rookies if they've missed time in training camp because of injuries, but For me, it would be Ringo and Makuba tomorrow night. Instead, he's kind of playing it safe and going with Brown and Jackson. We'll see if that pays off. Last year it didn't when he went with Avonte Maddox in the slot.
Boy, it must be nice. It must be nice to win a Super Bowl and then question the coach that got you up there. But he has a point. It's bold, and I like the fact that he's not resting. How do you feel about it? Do you think they're making a little bit of a mistake? Is there going to be some regression? I don't think it's talent. I really believe it's the leadership of the two talented young players that's really going to be the bigger question.
Yeah, listen, I think there's always with teams that win championships kind of that, we call it the Super Bowl hangover, if you will. And so that's what I find interesting about the Eagles this year, is that we know they still have so much talent on that team across all areas of the offense and defense to still be a Super Bowl contender. And frankly, I think there's plenty of people that still consider them a Super Bowl or the Super Bowl favorite this year, after taking down Patrick Mahomes, back in February. So you're kind of always, though, combating that mental part of it when you're coming off of that Super Bowl that Super Bowl title and that championship. It's like when that's your motivating source for so long and then you pull it off, it's like, okay, now what? How do you respond? Which is kind of why I like where Joe's going with this, and that he has, a point that he's looking at and saying, I think he's making a mistake here. I think that's kind of classic Philly fans, right? Like that's just kind of what they do. They're never satisfied. They wanted to fire Nick Sirianni last year, and then he rattled off like 7 straight games. I was there for the Browns game where they win the game, and the entire next day it was just radio heads talking about how he mishandled the whole thing. He was yelling at the fans. They wanted him run out of town that weekend. And then they go win the Super Bowl, and it's like, okay, he gets a little bit of a leash from that. I think it buys him a little bit of time and some respect, but these fans are right back at it saying this year, like, he has a lot to prove again. And I do think that's going to always kind of be the situation in Philly. But also, yeah, I think there is a challenge that comes with trying to now find that motivation after you've pulled that off and continue to fight for something that you've already accomplished. Eagles certainly have the talent to do that. We'll see what it looks like tonight. AJ Brown missed a lot of time in the preseason and all that. So, is there rust for him or any of those things that they kind of have to shake off? But I'm curious to see what it all kind of looks like as they try to defend this Super Bowl title. And, I think there's something to be said for, not resting on your laurels and trying to make sure that they're gearing up for this title run.
You get something put in your DNA, man, and sometimes you can keep winning because of that DNA. And it happened to the Patriots. People don't realize the Patriots were a big, big underdog against the greatest show on turf. And then they barely beat Carolina right after that, right? But it seems like after that, they always had this sense that they knew that they were going to win. Now the Chiefs are kind of that team where they always seem like they're going to win. And when they don't, you can always point exactly to what it was. With Philly, it's going to be interesting. Do they have that DNA? Do they have that now championship DNA where it's always going to go in their favor? They're going to win close games. And will the Vic Fangio decision in the secondary be the reason that they don't get a chance to go and repeat? We'll have to watch it very closely, but you can't watch it all year without starting at the beginning. And tonight is the beginning of the National Football League, and we cannot wait for that game. We're going to talk about the other team that is involved in that game, and that is the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to talk about a non-quiet offseason. Woo! They do that every single time. Jerry's starting to put money back into the team with other players. I think that might win them a little bit of favor, or maybe it won't if they get beat. We'll discuss that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP. Who delivered? Powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streak, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it on down. Jordan Lewis of the Jacksonville Jaguars was a guy that they sought out in free agency because of his ability to play through the whistle, also to play like his feet are on fire. And I watched him through training camp, and I'm telling you, he did exactly just that. And it's not a fluke. He's done that his whole career. And just like Jordan Lewis delivered for the Jacksonville Jaguars so far, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You save every Saturday on your order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, and fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. We're rolling along on the day that this game that starts the NFL season kicks off. At the time that we record this, man, we got less than 6 hours. I'm giddy, man. I'm so happy it's not even funny. I get to watch the Dallas Cowboys, and we get to watch Jerry Jones's team after they made one of the biggest trades that I've seen in the National Football League in my lifetime. There's a lot to go into this game. They could actually come out here and do something. They could come out here and win this game, and it would give a whole bunch of people that were mad at Jerry Jones just last week a chance to rejoice. But it's going to take a collective effort for them to be able to do that. I want to hear from Landon McCool from Locked On Cowboys, and then Spencer and I will come back and we'll get into the nuts and bolts of what the Cowboys got to do to be successful tonight and the rest of the season.
I'm Landon McCool with the Locked On Cowboys podcast, and here are 3 things to pay special attention to this Thursday night against the Eagles. First, the Cowboys' run defense. After the Micah Parsons trade, there was not a ton of talk about the fact that the Cowboys acquired Kenny Clark, the defensive tackle for the Green Bay Packers, now the Dallas Cowboys. But that is a huge news for the Cowboys as far as playing games and having the ability to stop the run, which is something that's been a problem for this team. So how does that have an effect? There's obviously a new coaching staff as well. The defense coordinator's changed out. So all of these things kind of add up to a lot of mystery as to how this Cowboys run defense is going to look. It'll be interesting to see. Number 2, what does the Cowboys offense in general look like? It's you've got to, Schottenheimer's calling plays, and what I saw at training camp on a day-to-day basis didn't look anything like what we saw in the preseason games as far as schematics or formations, that sort of thing. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how that kind of trait plays out. Is there a little bit more trickery, a little bit more misdirection in this offense than we saw before? And finally, what does the Cowboys' offensive line look like after all this turnover? Tyler Guyton has been confirmed to be playing this Thursday night against the Eagles, and this will be kind of the beginning of a new starting 5 with the addition of Tyler Booker in the draft.
All right, the Dallas Cowboys have a lot of questions going into the night, Spencer. But one thing I've noticed that has happened, you got a lot of talking heads, a lot of them former players, and bear with me for a minute. They say, well, Micah Parsons couldn't stop the run. But then in the same breath, they admit that the Dallas Cowboys have missed on Mozzie Smith, have missed on interior players. They've done well on the edge in that corner and on the offensive line. So I look back and I thought, well, Patrick Willis, when he played with the 49ers, had great defensive tackles. Ray Lewis had Tony Siragusa, the late, great Tony Siragusa, and Sam Adams. Maybe Micah couldn't stop the run because that's not the job of a pass rusher and a stacked linebacker when he's playing behind terrible defensive tackles. So a narrative, if they stop the run tonight, is going to be, see what they did? Yeah, but they should have gotten Kenny Clark or somebody like him while Micah was there.
Yeah, it's well said. It's a really good point. I think sometimes people forget the sort of symbiotic relationship that exists between especially a defensive line and the other levels of the defense. I think here in Cleveland, we have a prime example of that this year. This defensive line that the Browns have assembled, I think, is probably the best one under Kevin Stefanski since he's been here. And while I think their secondary is maybe lacks some depth, they can benefit from this defensive line if they're able to have a lot of success. And so I think the same thing applies to a team like the Cowboys. I do think I understand where trading a generational player is always going to be looked at as a net loss for that team. Like it's hard to find a player like Micah Parsons, and it does seem sort of short-sighted to do something like that. And I think it's warranted to criticize Jerry Jones and how that whole situation played out and all those things. But I do think like the addition of Kenny Clark is a solid one. I mean, you'd like him to be a little younger in terms of his career, but we know what he can do in this league. To your point, like he's a really good run stopper. He's a really good guy. He's great in the middle of a defensive interior and can make a lot of plays there. And so there is something to be said for that defense, taking a step back because you don't have Micah Parsons, yes, but maybe still having the right pieces and parts to stay competitive, and you still get something out of the player that you acquired in that deal. And then you got to see what they do with the first round picks. But I definitely think the Eagles the same way the Eagles, I should say, are going to be sort of combating that mental, how do we gear up for another Super Bowl run after we just did it? I think the Cowboys are now sort of in the opposite situation. They're kind of combating this emotional feeling of, well, what do we, who are we and how do we overcome and prove people wrong about this Micah Parsons trade? And, some guys maybe still sort of shell shocked by it happening so close to the season. Like, how has that messed with the psyche of this team? So that both these teams, I think, from a mental standpoint, are sort of combating different things. But I'm curious to see, like, if there's an impact from or a hangover, if you will, from the Micah Parsons deal and how the team plays, if they're inspired or not. Because to your point, like, yeah, they come out, they win this game, it would silence a lot of people that were saying a lot of things about this trade and Micah Parsons and Jerry Jones is an idiot and all that different stuff, which may still be true. But at the same time, it would go a long way because we know how we are in this league, Tony. Like, we react week to week. You win one game and all of a sudden all is forgiven. We're like, oh yeah, the Cowboys are back or whatever it might be. So, that a win changes a lot, and it would certainly change a lot of the narratives about this team if they pull this off against the defending Super Bowl champs nonetheless.
Yeah, we make a lot of micro comments and commentary about macro problems and issues.
You're right.
And sometimes that doesn't really, it just creates a lot of banter going back and forth. Trust me, I was in a barbershop for 34 years, and that's exactly what we did all the time. One thing I will say about that, though, is I remember when Jalen Ramsey they were talking about trading Jalen Ramsey, in that 3-week period where his back was hurting so bad he couldn't play for the Jaguars. And somebody told me, yeah, you don't really need to pay a big time corner. You don't need a great corner. You can take that and spread it around. The problem with that was it was the guy that picked him 3 years earlier. Why did you take him? Did you not want him to be that good? And okay, we want you to be good, but if you're too good, we're going to have to get rid of you because we can't pay you. So sometimes we have to think about that and how much sense it doesn't make. I want to pivot a little bit here to the division that you cover, the AFC North. I think it's been the most competitive division over the last decade or maybe even two. There's a sleeper in there, a sleeping giant. You hadn't won in a while, but it's Pittsburgh Steelers, someone that's, an hour and a half away from Cleveland. They've revamped their defense, and that might bode well for them. Check this out.
When you look at the way the Steelers have addressed their defense in this offseason, they know it, you know it, I know it, everyone knows it, that was such a major area of their collapse. And I think just the communication aspect, number one, but the discipline, number two, was really lacking in that run defense area. And so talking to a lot of these guys throughout training camp, you can sense that the Steelers defense, Terrell Austin talking to him as well, they are trying to do different things schematically. They know what they had out there didn't work, especially at the end of last year.
Look, Pittsburgh, if I think about their defense, that's not the reason they lost. They lost because they didn't have good quarterback play. But if their defense can be dominant like it has been in the way it looks on paper, and they could just tell the offense, if the offense says we can give you 20, 23 points a game and you can win 12 games, they'll take that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I think they absolutely would. What I think is interesting is the Steelers, with the moves they made this offseason, have kind of given off this sense of we're pushing the chips into the center of the table. They traded for Jalen Ramsey, giving up Minkah Fitzpatrick in the process, who had been such a staple in that defense for so long. They signed Aaron Rodgers, which does kind of feel like a Hail Mary attempt to solidify the quarterback position for at least a year. Obviously, they got DK Metcalf in that room. Seems like the one thing they're still looking for is another weapon for Aaron Rodgers, which is why I've heard people predicting that they're going to run a lot of 13 personnel and have 3 tight ends out there a lot. So I'm curious to see what that offense kind of looks like if Aaron Rodgers still does have something in the tank, if another year removed from the ruptured Achilles maybe does him some favors and he can get back to being some remnants of the player that he used to be. But yeah, I think what you say there is like a sleeping giant is a pretty good way to describe it, because it does feel like they are truly a team that is going to go as Aaron Rodgers goes. We know their defense is going to be really, really good. Their defense is almost always really, really good. And maybe it's better this year than it's even been in other years. And to your point, if they can keep teams off the scoreboard, that makes it easier for Aaron Rodgers and company to go to work. I really like what they added Caleb Johnson to that as a runner. If the Steelers kind of go back to that old school mentality of running the football and playing strong defense, there's no reason to think that they can't be a playoff team again and maybe even win a playoff game this time and maybe even challenge the Ravens to a degree, because they always seem to play that team tough. And that's part of just the nature of this division. Even a team like the Browns sometimes can surprise you and steal a game or two. So yeah, the Steelers are one of the more fascinating teams, I think, this season. Obviously, being close to it here in Cleveland, I'll be watching them at least twice a year, but it's certainly at other times throughout. And I'm interested as everybody to see what Aaron Rodgers looks like and how they sort of make this thing work in what feels like it's a season with a lot of expectations.
No doubt. We're going to touch another team, the team that's thought to be the favorite, not only in the AFC North, but the AFC as a whole, the Baltimore Ravens. Give you some breaking news and then a little personal touch from me and Spencer about something that happened on draft night. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive. And that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go above and beyond safety and style and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every single detail. Mazda offers more than safety. As an athlete focuses on every detail, Mazda does the same. From metallic accents to hand-stitched Napa leather. Whether it's a quick drive to practice or a weekend trip, Mazda makes even everyday drives feel very, very special. It's the small details that make big plays, and just like there's more to every player, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. And kickoff starts tonight. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I'm telling you right now, man, FanDuel is the truth because you can get it before the game starts, while the game is going, and then even some in-game action, especially when you got a good field goal kicker like some teams do, right? So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Moving and grooving here on Locked On NFL with my man Spencer German from Locked On Brown, sitting in for Chris Carter today here on opening night for the National Football League. My man Kevin Ostreicher always has something to be a chip on his shoulder, man. He's sick of people talking about Lamar Jackson. And the way that you deflect usually is to point to another dude that actually fits all the adjectives and the things that people say about Lamar Jackson, like he can't win, he doesn't deliver. Well, you know, there's somebody else that people put in the top 6 of the quarterbacks all the time. Bruce Arians said that he was one of the dudes that he'd take. Listen to what Kevin Ostreicher says about Justin Herbert.
Justin Herbert is who the national media think Lamar Jackson is. All right, Justin Herbert, everybody says about Lamar Jackson, can't win in the playoffs. Justin Herbert's 0. Yeah. 0-2 in the postseason. Blew that game against Jacksonville. Just abysmal showing. And then couldn't get the job done again when he had an opportunity. It feels like people talk about Lamar Jackson like he's Justin Herbert, and people talk about Justin Herbert like he is Lamar Jackson.
I see no lies detected. I've been saying that, and I think Ostreicher stole that from me. I swear to God, I believe I told him that foolishness, and he's running with it because I think it's true. But I also think it's true. It's Super Bowl or bust. I don't know if he has to win it. And I'll let you even answer that. Does he have to get there if you're Lamar Jackson, or do you have to actually win it to get the Steve Young monkey off your back?
Sounds like we got a little network on network crime here going on. Yeah, listen, I understand where Kevin's coming from too. Like, and he definitely always has a finger on the pulse of, you know, any Lamar slander that's out there, which I appreciate from Kevin. And I think Lamar does get an unfair. I sometimes unfairly criticized, like last year, that loss to the Bills, man. Like, yeah, he had the 2 turnovers, but there was a lot of plays that were out of his hands. Like, he got the ball where it needed to go. We know Mark Andrews had several drops in that game. Like, it was bad. It wasn't all on him in that scenario. And so I do think Lamar is obviously talented enough to and should be in the conversation for best quarterbacks in this league. I think he's certainly talented enough to take a team and win a Super Bowl at some point. I do think this year, though, expectations are sky high for that team. Maybe the highest they've been since Lamar Jackson's been there. They continue to add talented players through the draft. They, continue to add the right players in free agency to just bolster that roster. I think from like top to bottom, probably them and the Eagles might have like the 2 best rosters in all of football, just, from start to finish. So Yeah, I'm fascinated to see how this season goes for them. There's some lofty expectations, obviously, and I don't know. I mean, I think from the outside looking in, yeah, I think he has to at least get to the Super Bowl for people to sort of be satisfied and feel like Lamar is meeting the hype of that sort of surrounds him. Because I think it's kind of been long overdue for him, and that's I think what it comes down to at the end of the day. Like I get what Kevin's saying, but if Lamar doesn't want to, if he doesn't want Lamar to be compared to Justin Herbert or vice versa or whatever, or any of these other quarterbacks and be framed as like a quote unquote loser who can't get it done in the big moments. It's just about finishing the job. So, and like I said, I know he came close last year to doing that. It wasn't all on him. But that's kind of just how the quarterback position works. You're going to always get the brunt of the criticism. So I do think like anything short of a Super Bowl run will continue a lot of those conversations around Lamar Jackson, as unfair as they probably are, because that's the type of expectation that this team has this year.
No doubt about it. There's breaking news out there, and I always give Broncos breaking news because I said Sean Payton was going to mess around with Bo Nix and that crew that he was. I looked at the roster and I said, no way. Well, they re-signed 3 guys now. They have breaking news out in Denver, so I'm going to always put a pie in my own face every single time Denver does something right. Check out my man Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos.
Denver Broncos pass rusher Nick Bonito is going to be eating a lot of Casa Bonita here this upcoming season after signing a 4-year, $106 million contract extension, locking him in opposite of Jonathan Cooper for the foreseeable future. And the Broncos defense loading up with Bonito extended, Cooper extended, Zach Allen extended. They signed Dre Greenlaw in free agency. They locked up Pat Surtain last year. This defense has the opportunity now to be a stronghold for the next handful of seasons with a large portion of the Broncos' core foundational pieces intact. Bonito gets the bag after a 13.5 sack season.
This is how you get it done, isn't it, Spencer? You sign those young guys early before you actually have to. I think they got a recipe for a nice future there in Denver under Sean Payton.
Yeah, I think that defense might be. I mean, there's an argument to be made they're the best defense in football this year. I mean, from the defensive front on back through each level of the defense. There's a lot of talent on this team. Pat Surtain, as you mentioned, obviously you got Bonito. Obviously, I actually like the Dre Greenlaw signing for them. I that was a guy I thought the Browns might take a look at and could maybe get like a bargain deal. And so yeah, like I feel really good about this Broncos defense. There's people who feel so good about it, Tony, that they're ready to say that the Broncos are going to dethrone the Chiefs in that division. So it's the right move. It's the smart move, especially now that you have your quarterback situation figured out with Bo Nix. While he's on his rookie deal, you pay the other guys. It's not rocket science. It's the kind of the method to the madness here in the NFL. And so I appreciate the fact that the Broncos are sort of trying to go for it here in their own right, and make sure they lock up these guys long term so they feel their defense can be intact for years to come. That's going to be a team to keep an eye on, though, in the AFC, because that defense is so good. And if Nix does take that next step, man, is the sky the limit for that Broncos team in 2025.
No doubt about it. One more minute here with Spencer German, because I got to let him go do the rest of his duties. Draft night. Hey, man, we got Travis Hunter. Y'all got extra picks. How does that work out? How's that working out so far? I'll let you speak from your own mind since you got your finger on the pulse of Locked On Browns. And what have you seen from Mason Graham?
Yeah, I think the Browns are really happy with Mason. He's kind of a soft-spoken guy, but the beauty of it is like he is poised to be a really impactful player on that Browns defensive line, especially in terms of maybe freeing up Myles Garrett to so as crazy as it is to say, like even have better numbers and a better season than he's ever had before. Because normally it's like there's a guy opposite of Myles on the opposite end, and that's kind of his sidekick. But in this instance, it's like that defensive tackle is going to be competing for similar guys blocking him. That maybe frees up Myles to do some things. So I think the Browns are really excited about what they got in Mason Graham. But as we've talked about before, Tony, he and Travis Hunter are going to be forever linked, whether they like it or not. And if Travis Hunter goes on to have a Hall of Fame career and Mason Graham is like, he's a good player, but not a great player, which I think he'll probably be in that conversation. Like that'll be something Browns fans will remember forever. Now, if that first round pick they got for next year turns into their franchise quarterback, it's all water under the bridge and nobody will care, which right now I think is the read I have on the situation especially after seeing how the Browns are kind of making the rounds this past weekend. They went and saw Arch in Columbus, and then got on a jet and went and saw Cade Klubnik and Garrett Nussmeier in Clemson in that Clemson LSU game. It certainly feels like the prevailing thought here is that they'll somehow use one of those picks or package both those picks together to get their franchise quarterback next year and just add even more craziness to an already pretty quirky quarterback room that exists here in Cleveland.
I'm going to give them some advice. They need to go to Columbia, South Carolina, and look at Lenore Sellers. That's what they need to be doing.
Yeah, he should be next on the list. That kid's good.
Yeah,
really
that's
good.
right. All right, man. Make sure y'all go and check out all of our NFL previews on the Locked On NFL channel. You can look at them before the game start this weekend, and you can see exactly what we thought. Everybody worked real hard on that. All right, for Spencer German, we're going to let y'all get out of here and get ready for tonight's game. Spencer, thanks for joining us. Like I said, we do not take your time here for granted. Make sure you check out the Locked On NFL newsletter on the Locked On Podcast Network at Locked On Podcast/newsletter. For Spencer German, Tony Wiggins, happy debut for the 2025 NFL season. We'll see y'all tomorrow.